had the undesirable task of following some powerful stories. Thank you for sharing your lives. And let me just take a moment and say I'm not Mormon. If it's not clear to you yet. I was brought up Southern Baptist in Hong Kong. And for about the first 18 years, nobody ever explained to me why I was Southern Baptist. I just thought that we were living in the southern part of China and it just made sense. And so my story and how I come to you today, in a nutshell, I grew up in colonial Hong Kong during the time when it was a British colony. I was eventually sent away because my father was one of the organizers of student movement in Tiananmen Square in 1989. Created the Underground Railroad that facilitated the escape of all the students out of the country in the aftermath of the massacre that happened on June 4th in 1989. And I took the same route. I was sent away for my safety and for the safety of my family to the United States in 1990. Grew up Southern Baptist, and then I came to the States, and before I became the executive director of California Faith for Equality, I spent 8 years pastoring at a Presbyterian church in Koreatown in Los Angeles, where 75% of my congregants were first-generation undocumented Mexican. Deep breath. And so, in many ways, I come not as a activist or an advocate for gay issues. I believe deeply that faith and religion and the values and the communities in which we share must and should play a role in the world and the community in which we live. It was that reason that my father went out onto the street and why, as a 12-year-old, I went and learned how to go on hunger strikes and demonstrate and put the banners out and understand that it was my faith who demanded justice and demanded change. And so I think one of the things that have continued to guide my work as I took over this work of building California Faith for Equality was that faith must make a difference in the world. Stepping back for a moment, California Faith for Equality, just to give you a little bit of background, actually started in 2006, 2 years before Proposition 8 came into being. And it was a bill actually in anticipation of a ballot measure that was going to go on the California's elections in 2006 that never came into being. But what we've been doing is that we begin to organize religious support and begin to recognize that it's not just any particular group of religion, but that religion as a whole has historically now become the main barrier for equality for LGBT people. And so in 2007, one of the things that we did is that we filed an interfaith amicus brief to the court, accompanying the court challenge that went to the California State Supreme Court in 2007 that became the landmark decision that opened up same-sex marriage in California. And in fact, the brief that California Faith for Equality organized and filed was the one that was the only brief that was cited in the decision made by the Supreme Court that opened up marriage that summer. And in the aftermath, as Prop 8 has went on the ballot, has gone through the courts, California Faith for Equality has been that place where we have, on the legal side, challenged and stood up for religious freedom and for equality from our faith perspective at every court challenge that has happened, not only in California, but currently in the federal courts. And we have come a long way. If you, some of you, how many of you remember watching the court proceeding of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals a few months ago on television? Some of you? We interestingly featured a Mormon on the panel. A judge and Laura helped us wrote a piece that was, I think, really reflective of the kind of thinking that we have as an organization. But if you pay attention to that particular proceeding, in the aftermath of a press conference, I described to the press and to our supporters that if you notice in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal debate and argument for an hour and a half, the word religion and God never came up. And so I said that over the last 5 years, the religious interfaith communities have filed briefs at every court proceedings, to the degree where when this case started in the district court, the other side had filed a brief that was primarily about religious freedom and how they have the right to be protected from same-sex marriage, to the point where their legal team on their side began and decided to abandon that issue by the time they got to the Ninth Circuit. It is now no longer part of the argument legally for the other side that somehow Prop 8 protects religious freedom. That took many, many years of work, of organizing communities, congregations, faith leaders. There have been over 3,000 congregations and clergy and faith leaders in California who have signed on briefs in support of same-sex marriage in the last 5 years. That's a lot. But coming back to the moment that we're sharing here today, and I'm grateful for you giving an opportunity for me to talk with you. One of my first introduction into the work that many of you are doing and the work that Laura is doing came from a story that Joanna Brooks shared with me in San Diego. Many of you know her. She told me about how during the Prop 8 campaign, she went to the campaign office of No 8 in San Diego and actually walked in with information and evidence of what the Mormon Church was doing to support Prop 8 and the passage of it. And you know what they said to her? They said, well, thank you very much. Can you go sit down and phone back down? And as I hear the anger and the sadness that was in her voice as she shared that story with me, what I began to realize was that what they were shutting the door on, what the secular campaign who spent $40 million of their money and raised their money to actually defeat Prop 8 was shutting the door on the greatest resources and asset that they had in this fight, which is the story, the lives, the tears, the joy, and the families that is sitting right here up in this panel next to me. This is one of the fundamental changes that must happen and has continued to happen after the defeat of the No 8 campaign, was that we were beginning to realize that we cannot depend on simply a centralized campaign that says there's one message, there's one way, and there's one way to phone bag, and there's one way that you can participate and support this work. And that what we will begin to realize is that you are the experts, that you are the greatest resources, who knows the story and have the capacity to change the minds and the hearts of the people that we need to reach. I don't want to make this into a whipping of the campaigns or any of the particular folks who ran the campaigns. But in the aftermath, one of the things that came about in the Prop 8 was that there was $1 million that was spent to have about 15,000 door-to-door conversations with strangers across the state. That's a lot of money for not many conversations. I can tell you that I can challenge the folks in this group to have 15,000 conversations in the next 2 years and wouldn't cost you nothing. That is the power of what faith community and congregations and network of people like you bring to this movement and this campaign. Is that if we are able to understand not only that religion does not have to be the barrier, and that we must continue to organize and organize effectively to make sure that that's not the case anymore, but if we can tap into the relationship that each of you bring. And if that each of the stories that are reflected here in this panel gets multiplied just from one congregation, one ward, one state to another, that we can turn and change the way that we win. I know that many of you have been deeply hurt, and I want to say that the images that broke my heart was those people who stood outside of the Mormon temples after the passage of Prop 8. Some of them who tried to vandalize the church, some of them who screamed obscenity. Because for me, that is not representative of what the future and what we must be doing together. I am so glad that you have gathered here for a whole day and to sit through this moment of reflecting together, because the work, the hard work of conversations and relationship that you're doing, this is the reaction. This is the impact that we hope to see from your community. And we're glad that you're part of this movement and part of this network, and we hope that we'll continue to find a chance and a way to work together. So thank you for sharing your story again, and thank you for pointing the way of what real change can happen and how it can happen.